Hello, arty peoples, and welcome to another episode of Jerry's Live. My name is Emmy Klein, and I'm your host this evening, and today's class is JL201. It is right over here in the corner of the screen in case you guys ever need to reference that. But today's class is all about printmaking. It's something that's very near and dear to my heart. I totally fell in love with this process while I was in college just by mistake, honestly. But we officially put together a brand new kit for you guys to experience the basics of linoleum block printing. It's pretty fun, and I hope you guys get a chance to actually experiment with all this supplies. Now, in the kit, we do have all of the supplies here that I have on the table, and if you're interested in checking those out, go to the website jerrysartarama.com, and in the search bar, type in the code JL201, and everything should come up. Now, in the actual teacher's cart with all these supplies, I did put the kit itself, and I also put each individual item in case you were interested in, say, just the paper or the blocks, you know, all the different things that I shoved in there for you guys to check out. So let's go over kind of what's included in the kit. First and foremost, we have your water-soluble inks. Now, we included a black, white, and your basic primary colors. The cool thing with this is how versatile this color palette is. You can mix any color. You know, you can mix an orange, you can mix a purple, you can mix a green, and then you can desaturate it and darken it with tints and shades with the white and black. So you got a huge array of colors within just these 5 inks. Now, besides those inks, we also have 2 of the unmounted linoleum blocks. Now, the back side has this kind of almost like a grid fiber going throughout it. The front side is your typical gray, just a basic linoleum block. Now, this is really hard. It's not super stiff, but it is kind of, there are other blocks out there that have a little bit more flexibility to this. This is a nice professional level block, so you can actually carve it and get really nice clean lines. But in the kit, you get 2 of these, and I will show you why in a minute. You also have what is called a bench hook. Now, this is something that will actually lock right onto your table because it has the 2 different lips on it right here. So while you are carving, this will save your fingers. Trust me when I say that, because I stabbed myself a couple times while I was prepping for the show. It's one of those things that I will go over all the safety features that you guys need to know while carving linoleum blocks. But I was in my office and forgot my bench hook, and I was like, psh, I don't need that, and then I got my finger, which is, it's all right. I will live. I have a finger still, but just don't make my mistakes and use your tools as they properly are supposed to be used. Now, besides using this as a like a carving stopper, because you put your block on there and it actually will help you carve away from your body, and I'll show you how to do all that later on, but it also will stop your block, so you have a nice solid surface that will not let your block slide around, which is the issue of why I stabbed myself. So, besides those, we do have your basic carving tools. Now, you actually are going to have the set of 2, which is very useful. In the kit, it actually does come with 1 set of blades, and the cool thing with these is that either side of these unscrew, and it's a really great storage for all your different blades. Now, it does come with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blades. Forgot to count those. But each blade does a different kind of a cut, and I'll show you kind of which ones do what things. But that is the cool thing about these, is that get your blades back in there, you can close it, and now I can actually just shove this in my purse or my bag of art supplies and then go travel. I'll also show you guys how to attach the blades in just a minute, but you do get the 2 of those, which is actually very useful because while you're carving, I tend to have 2 blades that I usually use for just everything, so it's really nice to not have to switch back and forth between the blades with 1 actual handle. So that's why I usually prefer the 2. And then you also get what is called a brayer. This is a nice soft brayer. It's 4 inches wide, and it is for inking. So I will again show you guys the inking process, but this is the way to apply your inks onto your block once you've carved it. Now besides that, we also have a pad of 48 sheets of 9x12 washi paper. Now the reason why I've included this particular paper into your kit is because with paper, when it comes to block printing, when it's nice and thin and it's super smooth, you can get these really crisp, beautiful images without a whole lot of pressure. It's kind of my go-to, and it is a little bit more on the, I guess, kind of transparent side as far as paper is concerned. But when you frame these and hang them into like a, you know, on your wall, and you have like a nice backer, you can't notice at all. But it does give you really, really nice prints as far as the quality, and it's kind of an effortless thing. So besides that, you also have, it's kind of off camera, but I'll pick it up. It's not exactly light. A really nice press. This is, you guys are seeing my muscles, okay? So as you can tell, it's not light, but it is a kind of a basic press. It has, here I can actually pull this part out. You do have a felt pad, and then you have a steel plate. A steel plate is what you put your blocks onto. You put the felt pad on top of that, and then you can roll it through your press. Now this isn't what I would consider a like super professional level press. It's just like a basic kind of starter kit. And when you don't have a press at home, because presses are usually very large and so heavy that like a normal human being shouldn't be able to lift them and move them around without some kind of a tool like a pallet jack. This is a nice way of kind of tiptoeing into the process. And also, if you want to just run like a lot of just quick little small prints for your art shop or Etsy, you know, if you're going to a craft fair or something like that, you need quick prints that you want to sell, this is a nice way of being able to do this without a massive setup. So that is all the materials that are included in the actual kit. Let's get started. I mean, I'm excited about this. It's gonna be fun. So I did prep for the show, and I did carve a couple of blocks for you guys, so you can kind of see the process of how I go about this. Now, like I said, you get 2 blocks in the kit, and these are unmounted. These actually do come mounted as well, which means it has like a layer of almost like a Da Vinci panel where it's got the cradle and it's hollow, but it's a solid wood base. The reason why this kit does not come with that is that it's not easy to get through your press. It's a little thick. So usually when you go through a press, you want the unmounted because then it goes straight through. But with the mounted, it's one of those things that you have a nice solid base and then you can actually hand press it, which is really cool. So let's start with your different blades. Let me see if I can get this back on there. Ooh. Butterfingers, but I caught it. All right, do you want to go to the dynamic so I can actually show, or I'm sorry, the overhead? So it's hard to kind of see, but in this portion of the tools, this actually rotates because it's a screw, more or less, and I can actually take it completely apart and show you guys. So it is actually just a little bit of a screw. Now that actually goes into this portion of it that's threaded, and then there are 2 pieces that has kind of like the main body and then kind of like a little shell that fits right on top. Now I end up taking these things apart all the time. If you do, just kind of, you can tell which way is the tip because it kind of narrows and goes in. That part, I'm dropping everything, excuse me. That part goes straight into the little, I don't know what this would be called, the tip of the carving tool, whatever the name of that is, and then it just kind of screws on. Now, to put a blade in, you do have your sharp part, and then you have the base of your blade there. And the base of the blades are always shaped the same. It's just this little like half moon kind of a curve. And then if you actually look into the little part where it slides in, there's the shell part that fits onto the main body. That is actually thinner than the main body part, so you can actually see that this will fit right in there. And it slides in. Sorry, I don't think I loosened that up. Yep. Slides into where where it starts kind of flaring out, goes all the way to the base, and then as soon as you tighten it, as hard as you can tighten it, I mean, you don't need to like use any tools to tighten it, just hand tighten. What's the term, the German term, the guten tight? As long as it's tight enough to where, you know, it doesn't shake around and you can feel it getting loose, your blade is now completely secure. So this right here, let's kind of go through the different blades. Okay, I want to make sure I kind of get an idea. All right, so this right here is a V shape, but it does have a slight U bend at the bottom. And this, now remember, when you are carving, put it on your bench hook here, because that will save your fingers. I have now a really solid base where this will not slide. So I can carve away from my body, and I'm not going to go into myself, and I'm not going to go into my hand, because that's not something you want to do. Trust me, I know this. All right, so this slightly U-shaped V tip here will give you nice, can you see that? I want to zoom in a little bit. It'll give you nice little divots that, you know, you can just carve out. It's just a different kind of, here, let me see if I can actually, there, so you guys can see that. It gives you a nice little chunk taken out, you know? So that's that one. It's not a super sharp line, but it is good as far as when you need a nice soft edge. Now, again, if you get this thing off and the tip does not want to come off, just kind of shake it a little bit. This one's really in there. There it is. And yeah, I usually have these things fall out, but that's not a big deal. Pop them right back in. And then grab your next blade. This one, yeah, this one is a little bit of a sharper V. All right, so I got this right in there. And if I do, so this one's a slightly sharper V-shaped. Hopefully you guys can see that. But this one gives me a little bit more of a narrower kind of a cut. So it's a little bit more precise, and I can actually control it quite well. Make sure you guys let your tools do the work for you. These are sharp. They should be sharp. The reason why is because if you are fighting with your blades, then you are going to have a hard time getting it to actually go through your linoleum, and that is when you have issues with like cuts, and it's just not good. Now I believe they are, in case you guys, because I think this is slightly blurry, we're going to try and fix that for you guys in case, because I don't think you guys can really see my blades really well. Let's see. So this is, all right, there we go. We got a nice crisp picture for you guys. All right, so as you can see, this is my original, the one that I did this nice first cut here. It's got a V shape, but it's got a more of a U bend to it. This one has a very sharp V shape. Hopefully you guys can see that. So it just a nice crisp V shape, and so that's why it gives me a nice narrow cut. And then we have this guy. Now this guy is the tool that one of the two blades that I use on a super regular basis. It is, in comparison to the other ones, very tiny. This is the one where I usually end up carving, like specifically these tiny little areas where I can get really nice sharp edges in there and a lot of detail, because I have an illustrative background, so that's why I really like the small one. So And you can actually see this too. All right, so you can see the little inserts there. There is one side that is attached to the middle kind of bracer, and then there's another little piece that kind of flops around in there, and it's a little bit thinner. This should slide right in there. And then as soon as you screw this on, it locks it into place so where it just doesn't come out. All right, so this tiny little V-shaped one, it's very similar to this, but it just gives me super precise, really thin lines. Hopefully you guys can see that. So that's the one that I usually use a lot. Now the cool thing about this linoleum though is the top part of it is actually pretty hard. And then as soon as you get through that hard kind of coating of linoleum, the inner portion of it, the lighter gray part, is actually a lot softer. So I'll show you guys more so, I'll do that with the lettering when I show you guys how to do lettering. I tend to kind of carve around my shapes with this little one, and then I ended up like popping off a good chunk of the linoleum because this almost acts as like a barrier of where it wants to naturally break. And I'll explain kind of what that means when I show you guys how to carve the text. Now this one, in comparison with this blade, this is the first one I did, where it's the V shape that has a slight U-bend. This one is more of a U-bend. So it's nice and wide. You can see there. Nice and wide, and it has a big kind of area that would make more contact with the linoleum. And again, stick it right in there and tighten it until it doesn't jiggle around. And then boop. Super easy. Now this is a nice way to remove a lot, oop, and that went flying. This is a nice way to remove large chunks of areas. So like for this, for example, all of this where I just needed to kind of get it out of there and get it off my image, because this is the only area, the raised parts are what prints, and the areas that you cut away are what remains, you know, not inked and clear. Well, actually, the white of the paper or whatever color of the paper that you start with. So if you have a black paper and you use white ink, then, you know, the only part that's raised is what's going to actually be printing. So if you need to remove large chunks of areas like this over here, this is a good tool for that. Now, this is not my personal preferred. This one is. And if you see this blade, it is kind of like a U-bend, but it has a flat bottom. Now, that one is my other go-to that I use besides the really, really little one. And I usually use this to remove large chunks of areas as well. And this also gives me really good control and removes large chunks. Now, the other way that I do use this blade is actually on its side, especially when I'm kind of cutting into the outside edge. So I kind of end up doing a little bit like that. The reason why is because, you know, the blade's sharp all the way up to the very tip of that. So you can use these on their side for a different kind of way to remove the material. And this right here is exactly what I use to kind of pull large chunks. So like I said right here, if I wanted to remove up into that line, I can kind of push it in, push it in, and kind of, once I get close enough to it, just kind of pry it up. And it's not perfect as far as a line is concerned, because then I can turn it and then go back down. But it's just a nice way of kind of removing a good chunk of it. Now the last one, now I do know this one in particular, this blade in particular has a burr on the bottom of it. And that happens on occasion, just with the blades, and you can kind of see it a little bit right there. That's something that I would fix with just a Dremel. You know, it happens. These blades are not expensive, so I could very easily replace that if I need to, but it's not going to affect the usefulness of the blade. But the last blade,
while we're going over it, be careful when you put this one in because it is sharp on both sides. So this one is very similar to an X-Acto blade. Where I would use this is, say I was working on something like this and I had that detail already carved in. If I went to go thin that out with, you know, say my little V-shaped tool, there's a good chance that because this is so thin, it's kind of on the unstable side. So a good portion of that whole chunk might completely come off if I'm not careful. This right here is a way that I can kind of carve in and cut down into the material to where then I can go back with this tool and just shave that back out. It gives you a little bit more control as far as kind of almost like a stopping point. And it's just a nice way of doing that. And at the same time, the other way that I use this is if I go to print this block and I have a little bit of a high spot, I actually have taken it and just kind of drug it down and almost shaved it back down. Just because the material is already kind of on the softer side, just because I've already removed the hard shell. So that will kind of knock down those high spots, especially while you ink. If that's what's picking it up, you can go back and kind of fix those things. Now, the other thing that I am notorious for that you do not need to do is carve super deep. So as you can see, linoleum block is not that thick. You would be surprised as to how easily that tiny little cut is going to print. You don't have to remove a whole lot of material to get it to actually print. I am notorious for cutting super deep. And it's my own personal, it's what I do. You don't have to go that deep, but it's just a habit I got into. But you actually really don't have to remove that much material. So much so that I actually went through the block right there. You can actually see that. So, do we have a question though?
We do.
All right.
Marion was wondering how long the blades stay sharp and if there's a way to sharpen them or if you should just replace them.
That is a solid question. Now, all right, so in case you didn't hear it, Marion was asking if how long do the blades stay sharp? I have some blades that I've had since college. Depending on your use and how often you work with them, they can stay sharp for a very, very long time. If you notice that you're having a hard time getting through the material, because I actually brought one of my other blocks, I'll show you in a minute. I brought one of those home and I grabbed those tools that I had since college and I went to go carve the block, and I had been using these brand new tools, and as soon as I went to go carve through my block, I noticed how much more resistance there was. Now, if you do notice that there is that resistance, you either do need to replace them or you do need to sharpen them. There is it's called a whetstone. It's like a nice way of like grinding down the edges of your blades, but there is a specific whetstone that is made for these shapes. I honestly, I think I've only ever seen it in like a woodworking shop. And that was like a hobby store. And that was ages ago, but I do know they do exist. They're just, it does take a lot of effort and a lot of work to sharpen these. So if you are inclined to sharpen your blades, yes, it is absolutely possible. They're not that expensive though. And so I am the subscriber of, I will buy new ones. Now, I understand that's kind of on the wasteful side, but you know, it's just one of those things that it's my time versus the cost of buying new blades. My time is a lot more valuable to me to have a new set of blades to just continue to go carve, because then I can make more money as an artist with revenue, especially if I'm knocking out blocks, and then I can now print a ton of them and then move on with my day. If that makes sense. Hope that makes sense. So, put this back together. So those are the different blades that come with this kit. And like I said, they are sharp. Do not get cocky like I did and just pretend like you don't need any kind of a brace, kind of one of these. And even if you don't use one of these, make sure you are always carving away from yourself. The other thing that I would suggest, especially for those of you who have my issues of long hair, put your hair up. And in fact, I'm going to do that right now just because the more we go throughout the show, the more it is possible that my hair is going to continuously get in the way. Now that's including in the carving process and the inking process, and especially when you print on this roller. You do not want your hair to go through the rollers. Please put your hair up. Guys, girls, and everybody else, put your hair up. It's just a safety thing. You definitely do not want to do that. Do we have another question?
Yeah, we have two.
Okay,
So
shoot.
one,
Yes.
how long does a block survive, and do they dry up?
They don't dry. I have blocks that I've made in college that I can continuously print over and over and over again. They will last as long as you have them. And the cool thing is that you can always continuously go back and carve into them. So if I have this block, which is just a circle, I will show you guys actually, I layered them. So this was my first block, and then I printed this on top of it. Now, if I decided that I now wanted a texture into this block, and it's been 5-10 years down the road, I can go back in and carve this again. It's not a problem at all. Linoleum does not go bad. But what was the second half of that question? Sorry.
So the other question was, there's the discussion on Facebook about whether or not you have to use the press.
You do not have to use a press. The kit comes with a press, and if you don't use a press, you can hand press them. So that's why I really love this washi paper, is because it is super thin, almost so that you can almost see kind of my hand through it. It's a rice paper, and it's got a nice smooth side, and then on the other side you can actually see my print through it. It's that thin. The other side, excuse me, is slightly textured. You can actually feel the fibers of the paper, and I hope you can probably actually see it too. Like, it's super smooth, and then more on the textured side. So if you print on the super smooth side and you don't use a press, this is the kind of paper that you should probably be going for, because the thicker and the more textured your paper is, the harder and more pressure you need to put onto your block and onto your paper to get a nice clean print. Now, if you want to use rough texture, or if you want to print on the back side of this paper, you can. Absolutely. You can see the difference here where this is more textured, and you can see how that affects it. Now, this is still a nice thin paper. It's the exact same paper, in fact. But anything like that is going to affect the quality of your print. So if you don't use a press, make sure you have a nice thin rice paper, like washi paper. The other thing that you are going to want is, this is, I think it's on the same page. This is the brayer, and then on the same page is called a baron. It actually looks almost like, it's like a round puck. Actually, I think it's the exact same diameter of this guy. And I think Katie's gonna go try to grab one. If I didn't grab it and put it in my office, it might be over there. We're gonna try and see if we have one to show you guys. But it's just a round puck, and it has, I like the one with a nylon on the bottom side, and it has a handle on the top. And then you can just kind of use that to officially like press down the paper onto your block. Yeah, I think I put it in my office when I was testing these, sorry. So I have used the Baron before, and I've also used the back side of a spoon before. I mean, I've used the bottom side of this, even though this is kind of textured, so you have to be a little careful, especially with this washi paper, because when you're pressing it down onto your block, the more you're scrubbing this, the more you are going to take that paper pulp kind of back up and destroy your paper. This is a super thin paper. You don't want to put that much vigorous rubbing on the back of it, I guess is the best way to describe it. But no, you absolutely do not need a press to actually print your work. The press is nice though, because then, especially if you're trying to crank out prints, especially like this, it's a nice way to get your plates lined up. And again, I'll show you that when I'm going through the inking process and kind of the actual printing process. We're going to show you. But when I'm doing this, it's a nice way to line up my paper on the press bed with my block over and over and over again, and I can knock out 100 of these prints, and then all of a sudden now I have, if I sell this for $25, that's some good revenue as an artist, you know? And it's super cute, super easy, and it's, you know, as far as like being able to ship this, or if you're having people come to like a booth while you're at a fair, now that the world is opening back up, you know, it's super easy for people to take and go, and or even ship these out to your clients. So that is the carving process.
Real quick before you move on.
Yes.
They are asking on Facebook. There's a couple discussions going on. One is
I love it.
like the eraser, kind of like the softer texture linoleum, and what the dark. I guess it's not technically.
It's the pink stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pink one.
The pink one.
Difference.
The difference between this block and the pink block is that this is harder. The reason why I included specifically this in your kit and why we're discussing this on the show is because the pink one drives me nuts. Absolutely crazy. I cannot work with that stuff. And it's not that it's bad, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that me and that pink block fight, and we are not buddies. I've tried to be friends, I've tried to be talking to it, it's not work out. It's softer material, and it tends to crumble when I go to carve it. It's just one of those things that I've tried it several times, and as I go to cut through the material, it doesn't work the way that I kind of want it to, and that's why I preferred the gray block, because this is harder material. So to carve through this does take a little bit more of a sharper blade and a little bit more muscle, but I get nice clean lines. And again, I'm illustration background, so I want nice, pristine, sharp lines, especially if I'm going for something like this, whereas like somebody who is maybe a little bit more abstract or kind of likes those happy accidents would be totally fine with a pink block. They just drive me nuts. Sorry, it's personal preference, really. Any other questions before we move on?
The other thing that just everybody's kind of discussing is the difference between having the actual mounted linoleum on the block and the thinner.
Yeah, and that's, again, having it mounted or unmounted is a huge personal preference. Again, if you are printing it through a press, I would suggest the unmounted, because having that much more material kind of on the back side of your block, whereas if you have a professional press that is the size of this table, and it's, you know, you can raise it and lower it multiple, like 5 or 6 inches, you're not going to have an issue running that through, because you can raise it high enough to where you're not going to destroy your press bed or your felt or any of the things that you use to print these with. But if you're using like a smaller press like this one, you're never gonna get that mounted block through there. I honestly don't think it raises high enough to even get just the block through there, not even including your felt or the actual bed of the press. It's just, there's not enough clearance. So that's why with this kit, we gave you the unmounted. But it's, again, it's totally personal preference, and if you are hand printing, that mounted block is great. I absolutely love those. They're fantastic. Any other questions before we? Okay, cool. So that was the carving. Oh wait, no, we are not done with the carving process. I take that back. So the other plate that I've been working on, I'm kind of obsessed. It's my whale, and it says "Oh whale," which is very appropriate. You'll see why later on. So I wanted to show you guys how to do more of the precise kind of carvings, especially with like text. There is a way to get really awesome text transferred onto your blocks, and I printed my test text. Now I'm going to actually just take this. This is just a print off of the printer here in the office. Laser printer is the key. Don't use an ink printer. You need a laser printer. Now I'm going to do this kind of quickly and messy. It's because I don't want to have to like sit here and try to line this up perfectly. But for this specific one, I actually use the same font. But you want to print your text the right way. Step 1, print it the correct way. You do not need to flip it. The reason why is when you transfer it this way, which means it's going to transfer backwards. You need to carve it backwards. When you carve it backwards and then you print it like that, it's going to print properly. So whenever you do this, you don't have to do anything fancy with flipping it, or don't worry about anything like that. But you do need to print it on a laser printer. And black is easy enough to show up. So I'm going to turn this sideways so I can use this way. Now I just added this to the teacher's cart. This is an ad marker, the Chart Pack ad marker. This is the blender. This is, what is it, xylene based?
It's stinky.
It is a stinky marker, so be aware. The other option that you have is using like a solvent, like a turpentine. There are a couple other ones that work. I honestly, it's been so long since I've transferred these onto a block, but these I know do not affect your linoleum. I remember my teacher telling me that there was one specific solvent that might affect this. It's been a minute though. Do you remember, Katie?
No, but I can look it up while.
All right, she's gonna try and see if she can.
There's one that'll eat into it. That
Yes,
you don't want.
there is one solvent, and it's sorry, I should have looked that up before I officially was talking about it. But Katie's gonna look it up and see if we can get that answer. There is one solvent that will eat your linoleum, and you don't want to do that. I know this ad marker that is xylene based will not, and it's also really easy to apply and move on with your day. So I'm gonna have this kind of at the ready, and for the most part, actually, do we have? I don't have tape. Do we have some tape? It's all right. I will fudge it. It's all good. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm just gonna hold this down. Normally, I would tape this in place and kind of give myself a little bit. Oh yes, tape. Perfect. Amanda for the win. All right. So I will use a little bit of tape. If I can get this to start with my fingernails, sorry. All right, I do just need a tiny amount just to make sure that it's not gonna move on me, because as soon as you start transferring this down, if your text moves, you are going to be very grumpy, because then it's gonna move everything and all your alignment is gonna be off, right? So just do yourself a favor and tape it down. Just in the like 2 corners. It doesn't need, I honestly didn't need that much tape, but it's fine. So this is a stinky marker. Just be aware, if you have a smell aversion, this might be not something that you want to use. And this might not be a process you want to do. You might actually want to transfer it. Actually, while I'm talking about that, I'm going to close this. Whoo, it's smelly. You might want to transfer it down with like, just like the transfer paper where you kind of like go over it. But if you do that, like a graphite transfer paper, you will want to make sure that you flip your text, because you're going to have to see it in order to draw on top of it. If that makes any sense. I hope it does. But because we are transferring the print straight onto the linoleum, just keep it the same way. So gonna get that nice and saturated, and I'm gonna take the bottom side of this and just kind of press it down just to make sure that it really makes contact with your linoleum, right? Now, the thing that I have noticed with transferring text down like this is that if you get this too saturated, your print, the laser print, actually can run. And I think I might have done that because this is a nice juicy marker. Which if it does, you know, it's not a big deal. You mostly just want to get the shape of your text down. So, da-da-da-da, there's my text. So that is the way that I get text onto my images in the easiest way, where I don't have to try and figure out how to properly draw really nice text backwards and with like kerning and everything. It's just that's a lot of effort. But I did want to show you guys actually how to carve into this where you have like really, really thin little spots like that X. That's going to be a difficult thing. So I'm going to use that tiny little V-shaped that I was telling you guys about. And the way that I do this is when you have like a sharp corner, like the inside of that X, I start right on that corner with the very tip of the bottom of my blade and kind of just go in and pick it up. Now, it might not look like I did a whole lot, but I actually removed just the inside of that X. That will print. You will actually see that because I have removed that text, or the linoleum. Now, I will actually then turn my block and go into it from the other direction because I've already gotten that corner. I'll go in and do the other side. Sorry, I'm trying not to also lean in as well. So if you see the top of my head, please forgive me. Katie will let me know, but I'm also trying to make sure I'm being precise. There you go. Got just the other side of that, and again, I would move it this way, but you guys will not be able to see it, so we're just gonna pretend. So I start with each of those sharp corners, and now the inside of that X is carved out. Enough to where I know it's gonna print. So you don't really have to cut that deep. I don't know if you guys are gonna be able to see this. Yeah. You don't have to cut that deep into it for it to actually print. That will print. But that's how I usually get the really sharp edges, especially when I'm doing text like that. The other thing, again, is that you can take, not that one, this kind of more of an X-Acto blade shape and cut into those corners, and then take this guy and kind of just barely go up into the edge. That'll give you a nice sharp line as well. But it's one of those things that, you know, the more you play with it, the more you're going to figure out what's going to work for you. But that's how I got my text transferred down, and that's how I get those really, really tight spaces. So it's a pretty versatile material, which is really fun. So that is the carving process, and I would sit here and carve an entire block, but I don't think you guys want to watch that all day. But when you do actually print, remember, it goes the other direction. So I printed this down, and now that my text, because it's backwards, I print it like that. This is what you're gonna get. My lazy little whale. Now, this right here is what I would consider a key block. This is my lines. This would be my very last block that I print. Like I said, with this one, I had printed, so this was my color block that I printed first, and then this was my key block where I had the black ink and I did the line work on top. Now, if I wanted to, I could also carve an additional color block where it has the colors of the petals, and I could print that in between these two layers and then give myself some color kind of popped in there as well. The cool thing is when you have blocks that you carve separately like this, you can reprint this over and over and over again. If it's a print that people love and you have a lot of revenue coming in and people are like, I love that, I want one, and you sell out because you've printed 100 of these and all of a sudden people are still wanting more, you can continue to print these, and then you can kind of tweak the colors and make those additions of your prints. Now with this one in particular, I wanted to print a limited edition kind of a thing. So with that, where'd it go? I would carve, sorry, I wash this. When you print these and you wash them, by the way, they tend to bend. So as I dry them, I put something heavy on top of it to where it dries flat. Just be aware.
we talk about that in a few minutes?
Yes, I will. I will talk about the cleanup and all that. Is it the question's more about the cleanup, or is it more about? Okay, yeah, we'll go over cleanup at the end when I go through the inking process. But when you are washing off your brayer and your plates from the ink, they will kind of bend on you. So as they dry, I would just kind of flatten them back out with something heavy. This one I literally just test printed right before the show, so I rinsed it off quickly, and it's still a little damp. I can still feel it. But with this one though, I wanted to do a color block that would be a limited edition. So I'm going to print this one, and then I'm going to do as many runs as I want. Like say I do 100 of these prints, and then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to carve out an additional shape. So if I did this in light blue, I would carve out the top of his body and the top of his little fins, and maybe take out some of these little sparkles or stars if you want to pretend like he's in space. And then I'm going to print it again in maybe a darker blue. And then at the very end, I would put this on top of the whole color block print. I could even include that funky circle if I wanted to put that behind everything else as well. But I don't know if you can tell what is wrong with these blocks. This is something because again, I haven't done printmaking in, yeah, Amanda's got it. I haven't done printmaking in a while because I've been more focused in painting, and this is just one of those things that I totally forgot about. My block is backwards. So I printed, to make sure that my block lined up and I could carve out the correct spots, I printed this on top of the other block. I forgot you have to print it and then print it again. So what you would do is you would print this block onto a piece of paper, and then you take that piece of paper immediately and line it back up with your other block, so you guys can see it. And then you would print the ghost image of that print back onto your block. You can also, again, if you wanted to print it like this and then take another piece of paper and transfer it down, kind of a thing, you could do that too. But I forgot. So I spent all that time carving this beautiful block that I cannot print. And I did a test run. So it turned out really pretty and it was so cute, but I can't use it at all. Not even a little. I could actually, if I wanted to, take my test prints. I could get another key block for this and kind of alter the image and do another one, but that would be a whole thing. Or I could actually take pens and markers and go on top of this and do kind of another illustration on top of it, make more of a mixed media piece. But just be aware that the backwards thing will get ya. It will absolutely get ya. And I have done that with text before, where my text was the wrong way because I carved it in correctly. I've done that with the color blocks, and it's one of those things. It'll happen, and that's okay, and it's a process, and you just gotta appreciate it. But the other cool thing though is that these blocks aren't that expensive as well. They're fairly inexpensive, but you can definitely get another one and fix it. How are we going on time?
Oh, I was saying the time you put into it.
Time is effort, and effort is time, yes. So that's the other thing I wanted to make sure that you guys knew. Now, because Kitty did mention time, and it occurred to me that we are kind of probably running low on time. We want to get to the inking process, so let's do that. And then I will go over the cleanup and all of that for you guys as well. The other thing to know, as you carve, you're going to get all of this. It is not a super clean process. These little linoleum bits are going to get everywhere. A vacuum is your friend. Maybe get one of those handheld ones. Or a studio that you can do that in. Alright, so the cool thing with this bench hook is that you can use it for inking as well. You can get your ink on there and then roll it back out. Me personally, I use this for carving, but not my inking. It's not wrong or an issue if you do use this for inking. It can be used, and you can use either side, to be honest. It's just not what I do. What I do is I use a glass palette. So, and I usually also mix my inks with a palette knife. So let me get that kind of over to where you guys can see. Let's do a quick color. What color should we use?
Pink.
Pink. I can do pink. We have red and we have white. We can make a pink. So I'm just going to do a little blob of red. A little blob of white.
Are you going to do a layered printing?
I can do my flower one if you guys want to see that.
So specifically, someone had a question about how you register.
Yes, I will show you. We're on the same wavelength, guys. I will show you how to register your prints, because that is another huge question that I know can be confusing. So this is a lot brighter than I intended, but we're gonna go with it. It's fine. It's pinkish. It's just a darker pink. All right, so I probably put out way too much ink for just like 1 or 2 prints. But again, remember, if you are mixing your own colors like this, make sure you mix up a good amount, because if you have 100 prints that you want to do and you don't have enough ink and then you have to remix that, you're going to be fighting with yourself. All right, I got my handy dandy easy wiper just to kind of wipe my palette knife off. All right. With inking, there is a certain sound that you are looking for. So I'm just going to take my clean brayer and I'm just going to roll it through my ink. Now I am not going down and up and down and up without picking it up. I am going down, picking my brayer up, and then going back over it. Because if you just keep going back and forth without picking it up, you are just getting ink on that one spot. So then I'm going to also go this direction. And then this direction, and then this direction, because what I'm looking for is this texture on my palette. So it almost looks like leather, but it's very, very consistent. And you hear that sound? I hope you can. That is a sound. It's a very consistent roll, and it's got that stickiness to it. That is a sound that you want to hear when you get your ink on your brayer. You don't want to hear thunk, 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 because it's got like a chunk of ink or something that's stuck to it. You want to hear that nice, consistent roll. So, let's do the color block. So, the cool thing is with this ink, because it is water soluble, it does stay wet for quite a while, which is good. It doesn't dry up as fast as acrylics. It does have a pretty good life to how long it stays wet. But it will start drying faster than, like, say, oils. You know, it's going to be dry within an hour. And if I left it on this block, it's going to be dry within 15 minutes because it's a really thin layer. You don't need a whole lot of ink. So I got a chunk of ink on there. All right. Now, as you can see, as I'm rolling this, I'm mostly just focused on where the high points of my block is. But you can see I got little chunks of the ink on the spots that I didn't want to print. And this is something I actually do need to add to the cart. Soho wipes are awesome. These right here, just like a little wet wipe. Oop, and I touched my block. Let me get my fingerprint, because that will print. My fingerprint, if I don't remove that, that will be visible. But this right here is how I just remove those little blobs of ink that I don't want to print, because they will print, by the way. Absolutely. Right? So there you go. Now the other thing that I like to do is I take my, it's a 9x12 sheet of paper, I cut them in half. That way my 48 sheets turn into 48 times 2 is 96? Katie? Math?
What?
48 doubled. 96?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Haha, I'm math. So now instead of getting 48 prints, or if you can get 48 large linoleum blocks, you can print that big and get 48 of them, but I cut them in half, so now I have 96 prints that I can now sell. So there's my block. It's nice and inked. I'm just gonna shove that up because now I need my press. So I will go over the details of the press and kind of how I set it up, but whilst this is inked and ready to go, we're gonna move because I don't want this to dry out, okay? So I do need to pull my press over to where I can get, it's still engaged in the rollers here, but I'm just gonna roll this up. Now, as you can see, I have tape. That tape lines up perfectly with the corners of my block. I have measured it, I've taped it down, I've made sure that that's where it's going. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but right here and right here, I have little, I used a paint marker, and I put little corner marks of where my paper lines up. So here's the deal with printing. Once your paper touches the block, don't pick it up. You print it where it lies. If you drop it on accident, then that's where it's gonna be. So I line up those corners, and I have this kind of still hinged. It's not touching my block yet, and then I just drop it, right? I will put my hand down while I lay my felt down, just to make sure that my paper does not shift or move. Then I'm going to push this until I can feel the block of my print engage with the rollers. And then all I have to do is, I don't have this clamped down, by the way. You might want to clamp it down just for your own personal studio, but just roll it through, nice and easy. And you see how it stopped rolling with my roller? That's because my block disengaged. Now I'm going to actually pull it back through. I usually don't print it twice, but just for camera angles, see how it's not moving again? My block disengaged again. So for camera angles, I wanted to pick it up this way, right? Ta-da! There you go. Now it didn't actually print perfectly just because I don't think the pressure on this is as heavy as I wanted it to be, but it did give me a nice solid print. That's what you're looking for. It might also be because I'm moving things around and I'm not immediately printing it, and so this ink might have dried just a touch between getting it inked and onto the press bed. But that's the easiest way to get this to actually be printed. Now, if I were doing editions of this, I would go back over, grab my brayer, do another one, and then put it back onto the press, line my paper up, and roll it again. And I can go it back and forth without having to roll it through twice, just because, you know, that would be something that I would just be doing as fast as I possibly could to keep my ink going, and then also to keep that color consistent. But that's the first block. So, do we have another brayer I can grab? Because I definitely only have the one. And I can clean that up with a Soho wipe, but it might actually not be great because I do want to have the black ink as well. But let me also kind of put that off to the side because I do want to show you the layering. And while I'm cleaning this up, that's probably the first print is going to be drying pretty quickly. But I am just going to get a little bit of a space on here for the black ink.
A quick question.
Yes.
Could you use acrylic for this process, / open acrylic specifically?
You technically can print with whatever you want. The issue with the open acrylics will stay soluble for a good long while, and that might be your best bet as far as any acrylics are concerned. The issue I have with that is that if it starts to dry on your brayer is now going to be ruined. It's really hard to get off of there, but if you can do it in enough time to where you're not going to have it dry on your brayer or your block, you're going to have to kind of keep an eye on that. You can do it, absolutely, though. All right, so This is exactly what I'm talking about though. See how there's ink on here? I've already attempted to wash these off, which is why I got a new brayer, because I wanted you guys to see what it would look like when it was fancy and new and clean. It does not look like this, but you can see our brayers were not taken care of. They have ink on them, and this ink will not come off, and I believe it's probably because it is acrylic based. So that's the one thing, is that I can feel texture on this because of that ink, and that texture is going to affect your print. So let me try to find the smoothest one. I think it's going to be this one, because I don't think there's a clean brayer in there. I looked before we, yeah. No.
It's on the brand though.
Yeah. So this one right here, I can feel that acrylic has a ripple texture right there, and that's going to totally affect my print. So I'm going to put these two over here and just grab, this one's pretty smooth. So that should be all right. Let's grab my second flower block. Now remember, these are all the same size blocks, so my registration on the press should be the same for these. And I'm gonna use, we're gonna do the black outline, blue, red, black. Got it.
Black and pink is pretty.
That is pretty. It's gonna be pretty. And I don't have to mix color. And the cool thing with the Speedball printing inks, they do come in all kinds of colors. So if you're finding that you're making a color over and over again, try to see if it's available, because they have a good variety.
It's an oddly satisfying noise.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Will and I were joking that it's kind of like the ocean just... And then he said he was going to jump in and say, caw-caw, like a seagull. I have yet to hear it, Will. That's great. All right, let me put my print right here. Kind of push this up so you guys can see what I'm doing, because I want to color this block. All right, this one I do know is a little bit harder to ink, just because there are a lot more raised spots that can catch the ink. But again, I'm just trying to make sure that I'm only touching and focusing on the parts that are raised. I don't need to just roll the whole thing, because then I'm going to have black ink everywhere. And a light touch will really give you a good amount of ink on there. You really don't need to press it down really hard. But you do want to see a good consistency of ink on the entire area that you want to print it. Now the reason why I'm going back for ink is because everywhere where I do apply the ink, it is now removing it from my brayer, so I want to make sure that I'm still getting a nice consistent application of ink all over my print, or my block here. Now while I'm inking, are there any questions that I have yet to kind of go over so far?
Yeah. Can you replace the roller on a brayer?
Ah, that's a good question. I honestly have not seen replacement rollers. I would imagine you could.
You can take it out to wash it.
Yeah, like there's a pin here
Yeah.
that
So
you
it's
can
possible.
remove it. But I honestly have not seen replacement parts for that.
And then, I think you already said this, but you can print without the press
Yes.
by like putting the paper over and rolling with a brayer. Is that correct?
A Baron is actually the name of it. So it's like a hockey puck. It's about the same size as this circle, but it's got a flat bottom, and it's got a handle on top, and you just kind of push it down. Like I said, I've also used like the back of a spoon, as long as it's really flat. Those are not easy to find, but like a serving spoon, I've used that before. I've used the bottom side of this, but you have to use just that little bitty circle because the rest of it's textured. But, you know, you're also wanting a good kind of even pressure on the whole thing. So the smaller thing that you use to press down onto your block with your image, the more inconsistent your print is going to be. All right, so I'm just removing, again, remember, with a Soho wipe, just removing the ink that I don't want to have print, because where my my brayer kind of touched the surface. Now, if you do notice that you are getting a lot of these in the same exact spot, go back over it with a one of your carving tools and carve it back out. That way it isn't a high spot and you can just continue to print without having that be a reoccurring issue. I think I picked up ink right there with a Solo wipe. So I'm gonna take that back over. Yeah. All right, so now we are ready to print again. Move that over, get my press here so you guys can see. Get my print over, and just to make sure, it is still slightly tacky, but it's mostly dry. So that is good to print. Actually, let me pull this way. Sorry, I'm trying to move things where you guys can see them while also having table space. Okay, so because I've centered this with my paper, it doesn't matter which direction I turn it, but if you do have a certain registration where, like, if this circle wasn't dead center and it was more up towards the top and I wanted to keep that consistent, I would just have to keep kind of a consistency of which direction I turn my block. So again,
could you use oil paint for this?
That is a good question. You can use oil paint, but be careful because oil paints destroy paper. So your oils, you need to have the right kind of paper for something like that. Now, there is actually oil-based block printing ink as well. Yep, there we go. My block is now engaged. All right, it disengaged, so this is no longer moving. I'm gonna pull it back through so you guys can actually see. All right, yep. Let me actually pull this a little bit further. Whoop. There we go. There is my double plate print. And that's how I would get the same registration. Like if you look at this here, actually let me move this out of the way so I don't have wet ink plates kind of everywhere. And if you go back over to the overhead, you should be able to see this. There we go. So if you look at my two prints, they are different, but they are identical. So although, I mean, there are very, very small differences, and that's the name of the game when you have multiple plates like this or multiple blocks. So like for this one, I can see the green of that circle goes through the bottom of those petals up there. It does not go through this one. So that means my plates were slightly misaligned, or I just printed this one slightly off. I think honestly this was more lined up than this one was, so this would be more consistent, because I think I kind of eyeballed these. But if I'm looking for something that is a very consistent print every time, if I continue to have the registration on my plate and make sure that I take the time to lay down my paper, it should be within a very small margin of error when you print over and over and over again, to where that way your prints are hand done, but they are very consistent. But even having that slight change between them, it makes it kind of have that more like handmade feel, and it gives it a little bit something special. So even if your registration is not perfect, it's okay. And the cool thing is that you can also then mess with things like if you wanted to make it look 3D. If I were to print this flower in blue and then shift it over and then print it in red, I might have that 3D kind of effect if I were to put those glasses on, you know? You can mess with those types of things. And then you can continuously print it over and over and over again. Or if you do, like I was going to do with the whale, have your limited edition, and because you're destroying your block at the same time as you're printing, especially the color block, you only have so many that you've made. That kind of gives a little bit of a value to your artwork that wouldn't necessarily be there because there's only so many of them. It's like painting a painting. You're only going to have that one painting, and it cannot be reproduced. You can repaint the painting, but it's not going to be perfect every time. It's going to have slight variations. So when you do destroy your color block as you're printing, it gives you the ability to have a print that cannot be replicated. Or if you're printing a color that you've mixed, it again has that same kind of quality to it, because I can make a color that's very similar to this. I can make probably similar almost to a T if I really, really, really tried. But if I mix more than two colors together and I'm starting to make a very unique color, it's very hard to get that again. So it kind of gives your work a little bit more value and kind of gives you a limited edition run, which then pops the price of your artwork up, which is good. But again, remember, it's all about having fun. You guys can actually print these over and over again. And I see we have a question. What's up?
I have an involved question.
Okay.
So I'm literally going to just read it word for word.
Okay, I'm for it.
If you carved the flower lines
Yes.
and wanted to add substance to the petals, can
Yes.
you do anything else to fill it that can be printed and then possibly removed instead of multiple carvings?
Can it be printed and then removed?
She's talking about like if you cut the
Oh, so like
petals
a, yeah.
first and wanted to add something.
Yes,
back
absolutely.
onto the linoleum print.
Yeah, so if I were to, when I did this carving, and it's got ink on it now so you guys can really see it. If I did this as a single block, and I didn't have my key block here, and I had those petals were solid color, I can print that, and then I can go back over, carve those petals out, and then print the whole thing again. And if you have the registration on your plate, or say you have a way of doing it on your table and you've marked it off, you can make sure that registration kind of lines up perfectly every time. I hope that answers it.
I think she's talking about if you carved it like this already, if there's anything you can add back to the
Oh,
linoleum
to put it back
fill
in.
like
Oh.
Bondo or
Like a puzzle piece kind of situation.
Yeah. All right, so there's a slight margin of error when it comes to fixing your blocks. The only way I've been able to do that is in very small places. So like say, and I actually did it on here, where was it? I think it's right here. Here, let's go over to the overhead so you guys can really see. It's right here. You see where that line gets just a little thin? That's because my hand slipped and I carved into that little area on accident. And I did not mean to do that. I could have, if I wanted to, taken, I think it's liquid nails that I've used before, and glue that piece back in, let it fully cure, and then slowly and very carefully carve around it to where I can trim it off and kind of get it back to where it needs to be. The issue that you run into with that is that you can't do, I mean, technically you could do large chunks of area like this, but you run the risk of having it be higher than the original surface. So if you have anything that's not completely perfectly surface level on those little areas, they're gonna print different than the rest of it. So like if I were to fill that in with like a liquid nails or a glue or silicone or some kind of adhesive that would kind of fill it, maybe even like wood filler, but that would also have a different density. So as you're pressing your press down, or even the way that the ink reacts to the surface, I think you're gonna have a hard time getting it to be a consistent print. Because if you were to even put like drywall joint compound or like what's the other, like a modeling paste in here, that's going to be different absorbency than the linoleum, so you're going to have an inconsistency with the ink, I think. If I were you, the only thing that I would really do is carve another block, which, trust me, been there. I have literally just did it. So I'm going to actually do a limited edition of my whale. which is very, very valid with this block that I printed, or that I carved backwards. So I am going to officially finish this block, and I will post updates for you guys to see the finished product on my Instagram. So misscakes.art if you want to see it. What? And the group. I will also tag it in the Facebook Live group. So I'm going to put updates for these in those two places, so that way you guys can see my Oh Whale official print. And I'm going to try and give you guys some process shots and everything as well. But the only option I have is to just carve another block, which honestly I can take this block that I carved on accident backwards and print it now onto another block, and I know exactly what I need to carve. But it's one of those things that there's not really an easy way to fix an oopsie on linoleum. It's one of those things that there's happy accidents, and then there are just accidents, and that's kind of the name of the process, which is okay. It's kind of the beauty of it. It's handmade. It's gonna be not a print. If you wanted a print, you can just print it off from a printer, off of a computer. This is a handmade product, so that's why it's gonna have that kind of a quality to it, and so is the process. So when you mess up, you just have to kind of chuckle and move on and not be super mad that you did the whale backwards. But carve another block, and it's okay. Do we have any other questions though before I officially sign off? Oh, I didn't go over cleanup. Didn't go over cleanup. So the cool thing with this, the ink that I've included in the kit, it's all water soluble. So even though for the most part, yeah, this is pretty dry, as soon as I put this under water, it's all gonna come off. Also keep that in mind for your prints. These are water soluble. They will reactivate with water. So that's the other thing that I did, is that, yeah, I was testing out like having a different kind of color combination on this. It turned out really bad, so I wasn't really mad that I messed it up. But if I were to take water, and I did down here, and kind of scrub it out a little bit, it just started destroying my paper, and the ink picked back up, and now it's blurry. Here, let me also, yeah. So like you can see the fibers of my paper started coming up, but that ink did reactivate, so it definitely will come right back up. So it's one of those things that you just have to be aware of. If you don't like that it's resoluble and it will re-wet with water, you can also use the oil-based block printing ink. There is a lot of different varieties. They all come in the same colors. They just do take a little bit longer to dry. So say you want to do a multiple block print like this, all you have to do is print the first one, let it dry for however long it takes to officially get that thin layer of ink to fully cure, and then you can go back on and do another layer. But the oil inks do take kind of a good chunk of time to dry fully. But with all this, it's just washable with water. All you have to do is just rinse it off and it's gone. It's easy peasy, lemon squeezy, and super easy cleanup. I mean, you guys saw me clean off the palette with just a Soho wipe, which is super easy. Just wipes right up. It doesn't take a whole lot to take all of this off. Like I said though, when you do get your blocks wet, they tend to curl. Just dry them with something heavy on top, just so you don't have that issue of it kind of being a popped up kind of dome when you go to print again, because then it might ruin your registration, which is very frustrating. But you can kind of alleviate that by pushing it back down. They're pretty durable. You can't really go wrong with squeezing these things and making them kind of bend back. But that was the block printing kit, guys. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you learned lots. I hope you are excited with the printmaking process as I was. It is really fun, and as long as you use your tools in the proper way and you don't stab your finger like I did, it is awesome, and it's just a ton of fun. And the limits are just, there's no limits with this. I mean, sky's the limit with, whatever you want to print, and kind of make additions and carve things out and kind of see how they react. It's a really fun process. But again, if you guys do this, make sure you tag me in our Jerry's Live Facebook group with the code JL201. And then also, if you tag it on Instagram, do the same hashtag JL201 so I can find it, because I would love to see what you guys print. And make sure you join me next week. I have a special guest. Andrew Cook is going to be in from Savoir Faire, and we are going over brand new materials with the Edding markers and a Fabriano 1264 paper pads. There's a whole new line, and it's really cool, and I want to show you guys, and it's going to be amazing. So that was it, guys. I hope you had fun. Oh, AOC. Are we officially announcing it? We're officially announcing it? Oh my gosh, guys. I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't know if I was allowed, but Art of the Carolinas is officially happening. I don't know if you're excited, as I am, because it's going to be amazing. And, by the way, I'm teaching. You should totally come and see me. It's going to be amazing. Even if you don't take my class, I will be around. I will be bopping around being me.
So me.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, guys. Art of the Carolinas, if you are not familiar, is a huge, huge thing here in Raleigh, North Carolina. What's the website?
Artofthecarolinas.com.
Artofthecarolinas.com. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
November 12th through 14th.
There you go. That's the
Classes
official
should be up
dates.
July 1st.
Yep, July 1st is when the classes are officially up on the website, artofthecarolinas.com. November 12th through the 14th. Mm-hmm. That is the dates of the official Art of the Carolinas.
Classes start on the 11th, though.
Oh, yes, classes do start on the 11th because there are several days of classes and it's gonna be fun. I'm so excited. So I hope to see you guys there. And of course, if you guys have any questions about that, feel free to shoot them in the chats below. I will be going back and making sure to answer any questions that we missed. So that was it, guys. I hope you guys see me at Art of the Carolinas, and I will see you next week.